Hello guys, you're welcome to another tutorial on this channel. Thank you for stopping by. In today's video, I'll be showing us how I recreated this beautiful dress which has shoulder drawstring and a basque waistline. I used 3 years of fabric to make mine and I totally love the outcome. So if you love sewing tutorials like this, why not keep watching and let's get into the video. To make this dress, I'll be using 3 yards of this Ankara fabric, but you can also use any other fabric of your choice. And if you want yours longer, you'll be needing 5 to 6 yards, depends on how full you want the gathers. I will be drafting on this pattern paper and I've gone ahead to mark out the basic measurements. This is the starting of the shoulder line, and from there I came down by 9.5 inches for the bust point line, 13.5 inches for the under bust, 16 inches for the waistline. Then I extended the waistline by 4 inches. Remember, we are working with the basque waistline and the total measurement there is 20 inches. Now I will take the neck measurements. The width is 3.5 inches and the depth is 3 inches. We are working with a V neckline which extends to the under bust line, so I will adjust this later. Next, I will mark half of my shoulder measurement. My shoulder is 15 inches and half of it is 7.5. Now this dress has its sleeve cut together with it, so the next thing I'll do is to measure how long I want my sleeve to be. From where my shoulder measurements stop, I'll mark my sleeve length, which is 10.5 inches, and the total measurement on the starting line is 18 inches. From that point, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, then connect the point this way. From the shoulder slope, I will determine my sleeve opening and I will use my bust line to determine this, and the measurement there is 8.5 inches. Go ahead and determine how wide you want your sleeve opening to be. So guys, this dress is in 3 parts. The first part is the shoulder to the under bust, then we have from the under bust to the basque, and from the basque to the gathers. So we are drafting the first 2 parts on this pattern paper, and this dress does not require the bust circumference. On the under bust line, I will measure my under bust circumference divided by 4. Now this dress has excess fabric around the under bust area which was gathered, so for that I will just take out some inches from the 18 inches at the shoulder line. I will take out 4 inches, then mark 14 inches, and that 14 inches will later be gathered to my under bust measurement. I will now measure my under bust circumference divided by 4, which is 7 inches. On the waistline, I'll do the same. My waist circumference divided by 4, which is 7.5 inches. And on the full length line, I will use my hip measurement, and it is 10 inches. Now, on that full length line, you might not use your hip circumference. Just measure from your shoulder to where your full length stops. Then you measure around that part. Whatever you get, divide it into 4 and mark it. Next, I will connect the point on the under bust line to the sleeve opening with a curve this way. And this is all for the drafting of the first and the second part. I will cut it into 2, then I will adjust the neckline and also shape the basque waistline. I will set the second pattern aside to work on the neckline. Remember I said the neckline extends to the under bust line, so I'll connect it now. And this is the front neckline. For the back neckline, I don't want mine as deep as this, so I'll just use the bust line for my back neckline. And if you don't still want yours to be as deep as that, just measure how deep you want it, okay? I will cut out the back neckline first, because I'm using the same pattern for the back. After transferring it to my fabric, I will cut out the front neckline. And for the basque waistline, I will go up from this full length line by 2 inches. Yours could be higher than that, depends on how shaped you want your basque. And you can connect your points with a sharp V this way. For me, I don't want it to be a V, I want it curvy. So I'll place my pattern master this way and connect the points. The next thing to do is to transfer each of those patterns to my fabric. I'm using this pattern for the back piece first, so I'll be adding zipper allowance at the side and also this side. This is what I have after transferring my pattern to the fabric, and I cut out double of this pattern. I also added 1 inch zipper allowance at the center back, half inch sewing allowance at the neck area, 1 inch at the shoulder because of the casing for the drawstring. I also added half inch to the sleeve opening, the side as well as the hem. To the band, I added half inch sewing allowance to all the sides and 1 inch at the center back for the zipper allowance. Now at the waist side of the zipper allowance, I will go in by half of an inch. This is to eliminate the zipper bulge. Then I'll connect the point this way and cut off the outer part. I will go ahead now to cut out the front neckline and transfer the pattern to my fabric. I added half inch sewing allowance to all the sides and 1 inch to the shoulder, and I did the same thing to the band. I cut out the band on fold and I have 1 piece, and I also cut out the upper part on fold as well, and I have 2 pieces, and this is what it looks like. The next thing to do is to iron interfacing to the wrong side of the front and the back piece, and I will also cut out lining for it. After ironing interfacing to the wrong side and cutting out lining pieces, this is what I have. The next thing to do is to use facing to turn in the neckline. You can also use bias or cut out lining for it. I already cut out the piece for the facing. The width is 1.5 inches and the length is long enough for the neckline. I'll go over to my sewing machine to stitch using half-inch measurement. After stitching, I will turn it to the wrong side and use hemming gum to hold it down. After using the facing to turn in the neckline, this is what I have. I also use hemming gum to hold down the facing. The next thing to do is to overlap this piece on each other, and I'll be using about 2 inches to overlap it. Here is me checking if the neckline will not be too deep after taking out the 1 inch shoulder measurement, and I think I'm okay with it. So I'll pin it together, then go over to the sewing machine to run a loose stitch which I'll be using for the gathers. After running the loose stitch, the next thing to do is to pull on one of the thread to make gathers, and I'll be making the gathers to fit my underbust measurement plus half-inch sewing allowance. The next thing to do after making the gathers to fit the underbust measurement is to attach the band. I already notched the center fold of my band and I already notched the center fold of the main piece, so I'll align the notch parts together, then pin the band around the gathers. I will be stitching it on the wrong side so as to arrange the gathers well on the band, and after stitching, this is what I will have. The next thing to do is to stitch the lining too. I will use the lining to cover up the seam. Notice the placement of my lining. I'll go over to the sewing machine to stitch. After stitching, this is what I have. You can see the seam is neatly covered. The next thing to do is to work on the back piece, so I'll set this aside to do that. For the back piece, I already cut out the facing for it, so I'll go over to the sewing machine and stitch the same way I stitched the front facing. I use the facing to turn in the neckline, flip the facing to the wrong side and use hemming gum to hold it down. I also run loose stitch at the hem for the gathers, so I'm going to pull on one of the threads to make the gathers just like I did for the front. This is what I have afterwards. The next thing to do is to attach the band, and this is how I will stitch it, the right side touching the right side, and then I'll be stitching on the wrong side in order to arrange the gathers on the band. And after stitching the gathers to the band, I'm going to stitch the lining piece as well, and I'll do the same thing to the second piece. And this is what I have after stitching the band and the lining piece together. The next thing to do is to turn in the hem of the sleeve, so I'll give it a double fold and then I'll stitch, and I'll do the same thing to the second piece as well as the front piece. Here, I've turned in the hem of the sleeves and stitched it down. The next thing to do is to join the shoulder. So I place the back piece on the front piece right side facing, and I'll go over to the sewing machine to stitch using 1 inch measurement. After joining the shoulder, I open up the seam and iron it flat. The next thing to do is to create casing for the drawstring. So I'll turn in the edge of the seam this way, making sure the casing is wide enough to accommodate my drawstring. Then I'll pin it down and go over to the sewing machine to stitch all the way down, and I'll do the same thing to the second shoulder. After creating the casing, I will also stitch the drawstring. These are the pieces for my drawstring. I cut out 4, and the length should be as long as you want it. And this is how I will stitch it. I'll fold in both edges, then fold it in again, and run a stitch all the way down. And I'll do the same to the remaining pieces. I created the casing for the drawstring, and this is what it looks like. And I did the same thing to the second shoulder. I also stitched the drawstring, and I already inserted 2 here. After inserting, I make sure to stitch down the edge so that as I pull, it won't remove. So when you pull on your drawstring, you get that ruche effect. Now I'm going to insert the remaining drawstring into the casing of the second shoulder. So I'll just insert it into the hole, and after inserting, I'll make sure to secure the edge. So I inserted the drawstring the same way I did for the first shoulder, and then I stitched down the edge. The next thing to do is to close the side, and this is how I will stitch it. And after stitching this side, I'll stitch the second side the same way. The next thing to do is to attach the gathers. You have to measure around the hem here to know the measurement to cut out for your gathers. This is the piece for my gathers, and the length is 25 inches. The shorter part of your top should determine the length of your gathers. Remember, I said my fabric is 3 yards, so I'm using that 3 yards as the width of my gathers, and I folded it into 4. Here I'm notching the center fold as well as the side fold. From the center fold, I will come down by 1 inch. This will give room for the basque, and if your basque is a V, you can use 1.5 or 2 inches. Then I will cut it out, and after cutting, I will go over to my sewing machine to run a loose stitch at the top for the gathers. After running the loose stitch, the next thing to do is to pull on one thread to gather the fabric. Next thing to do is to attach the top to the gathers. I will pin the center notch together as well as the side notch. Then go over to the sewing machine to stitch this way. After stitching the two parts together, the next thing to do is to attach the zipper. I'll turn my fabric to the wrong side and mark how the zipper will be attached. The zipper will stop at this point, and I will stitch the remaining allowance all the way to the hem. And after fixing the zipper, I will fold in the hem and stitch it round. I attach the zipper to my dress, and I also turn in the hem to stitch round. So guys, this is all for the making of this dress. Thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And if this is your first time of coming across my channel, thank you for stopping by. Please do not leave without subscribing. And I'll see you in my next one.